Well, it's finally warm enough to get some work done. This car's been sitting all winter. Today I'm going to be working on getting it running. I'm going to take the yellow STI side feed injectors that I have installed. This is an extra set, but I have them installed. I'm going to take those out, put the stock ones back in. I'm going to plug the stock ECU back in. I also need to change the crank trigger because I swapped it to a 36222 trigger for use with the standalone. And since I'm going back to factory for now, I will have to switch back to the stock 6.7 trigger. I will also need to do some repair to the MAF wiring here that I tapped in for the GM intake air temp sensor. And then it should be ready to go. The injectors are right down in here. There's a fuel rail that they go in, and it's got 2 bolts on either side. It's easiest to just take the whole rail out and then remove the injectors once the rails are out of the vehicle. They're a real tight fit in there, and they can be a real pain to get out. These fuel rails are held in by 2 bolts under the rails. There's one right there and one right there. 2 12 mils, they have to come out, and the fuel rails will come right out. Alright, I got the rail out. Little bit of trickery, just because wiring and whatnot. There are 2 O-rings that sit on here, and in this instance they stayed in the intake. Just make sure if you're taking these out that those O-rings don't fall out, because you'll have a fuel leak if they do. Just got to make sure they're back either on here or in the intake when you reinstall, and make sure they don't get crushed. I got this rail out for the fuel pressure regulator right there, the UFO looking thing. It has this style of screw, so obviously that's not a hex head. I used a Phillips bit and a socket to get those screws out. I couldn't quite get enough torque on a screwdriver. Once they were cracked loose, I could use the screwdriver. And then up here, charcoal canister lines make this fuel line a little more difficult because they're all attached, but again, just pull that out of the way. One thing else is there are these spacers. This one fell. The other one's right here. These spacers go under the fuel rails when you bolt them back in, so you got to make sure those are in place. But have the rails out on either side, and now it's time to swap injectors. Working on the fuel rails here, you got to take the screws off each of these caps and then pop the injectors off. I've found what works best. Take the cap off and then just apply direct even pressure, and they just pop right out. To put the new injectors in, I'm using some power steering fluid to lubricate everything so it all slides back in nice and easy. Got both sets swapped out. Gonna reinstall these. Got the fuel rails installed on both sides. That side in, that side in. Next, crank trigger. To replace the crank trigger, I gotta take the timing belt off, which means I gotta take all these shields off, the drive belts, the harmonic balancer, and usually I pull the fans out in the coolant reservoir just to make more room. Gotta get all that out, get the timing belt off, then I can take the crank sprocket off and swap it out for the stock one. I'm using a chain wrench on the harmonic balancer here to keep it in place while I take the 22mm bolt loose. A little trick for manual cars, if you don't have a chain wrench, is you put it in gear and pull the handbrake, assuming your handbrake works. And that's enough to actually break the bolt loose. But if you have a chain wrench, obviously just make sure you don't mess up the grooves for the belt. There's that thicker rib in the middle there. Try and get the teeth on that, and works great. Got the timing covers off. The lower bolts for both fans are so rusty they aren't coming out, so fans had to stay in. I put the crank bolt back in, and I'm now going to rotate the engine so that there's a timing mark on this sprocket. It needs to line up with a notch on the oil pump right here, and then the timing marks, it looks like they're marked, need to line up with the notch right there and notch right there. Got to get them all lined up before I take the belt off, just so it's all ready to be put back on. This is a non-interference engine and it doesn't really matter, but it's always good practice to have it at top dead center before taking the timing belt off. Got a pry bar in here. Pry against the water pump, against the tensioner, and I was able to put the pin back in the tensioner. This way I don't have to throw it in a vise or anything, nor do I have to even take it out. I can just leave it in. I'll take the cogged idler out and the smooth idler right there. Take the belt off, replace this trigger, put the new trigger back on, and then install this one first, and then that one over there. Here's the difference in the two crank triggers. This is the factory crank trigger. There's 6 on the crank, and then there's 7 on the cam. So it's called a 6-7 trigger. This is from newer. It might have started in 2004, maybe it started in 2005. I can't really remember exactly. But this is a 36222. There's 36 teeth with 2 missing here, 2 missing, and 2 missing. This has a lot better resolution, and when using a standalone, you only need the crank trigger if you use one of these, which is why I switched. You can use the factory setup for a standalone, but sometimes there's sync loss at higher RPM, so I switched to this one when I was running on the standalone. Since I'll be back on the factory ECU for now, I'm going back to the factory trigger here. Got the timing belt back on there. I like to use these file clips to keep it in place. It doesn't mar up the belt at all. See, the tick is right here, and there's the mark there, and the factory marks are still visible on the belt, so it makes it easy to line up. You just clip it on right like so. Got this one lined up here with the mark on the crank and the mark on the oil pump, and it's lined up right there. So from here, I'm going to put the cogged idler on first, then I'll put the smooth idler on. I'll double check everything, take the file clips off, and then pull the pin. Got both idlers installed. Still got my timing mark up top. Timing marks look good there. Timing marks look good there too. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this pin. And then I like to rotate the engine over just to make sure they're all still lined up. 2 rotations of the crank equal 1 rotation of the cams, and if they all still line up, then I'm good to put it back together. Well, I didn't film anything in between. It's getting cold out, so trying to hurry up to get this done before it gets too dark. Got everything put back together. Got that new harmonic balancer on there. I need to go inside and grab some replacement terminals. I have new terminals for this plug, and I'm gonna just put new terminals on and put the pins in, and then this will plug into the MAF sensors and should be ready to start after that. Well, I'm all done for tonight. Injectors are installed, crank triggers swapped over, MAF wiring is fixed, intake's put back on, wideband O2 sensor is installed, vacuum line for boost gauge is run back through the cabin. Everything out here is about buttoned up. Still need to put the coolant reservoir back in and install the battery. It is yet another day. Today I'm going to plug in the ECU, fire it up, see how it runs. I will then do a compression test and see if there's anything wrong with the engine. It had a really bad misfire before, but only at lower RPM. I'm hoping that it is just a cracked exhaust manifold. The exhaust was really rusty, and I welded it up myself, not knowing how to weld. So there's a good chance that it's just the exhaust that cracked. That's what I'm hoping anyways. Won't know until I do a compression test and see how the engine is. Engine might be toast, and all of this was for naught, but only one way to find out. Under the dash here, got the ECU bolted back in place. It's a bolt there, and a bolt there. Got it all plugged in. Battery's hooked up. Everything's hooked up and ready. Let's give it a go. Well, it runs. It's got a misfire. The rattling, knocking sound is the fact that the exhaust here hits the fender, so it makes a whole lot of a racket. Sounds really bad, sounds like it's the engine, but it's not, it's just the exhaust right there. Moving on to the compression test. Spark plug number 2 came out looking normal. Number 4 came out very wet with fuel. It's not oil, it's fuel. So it's good that it's not oil, but not great that it's fuel. Compression test for number 4 was around 190, which isn't too low to be concerning. We'll go ahead and see what cylinders 1 and 3 look like. The number one spark plug tube was full of oil, and you can see the boot is all swollen here. When I took the plug out, there was fuel on it. It already dried. There wasn't any on the inside, just like on the rim here. And then compression for cylinder 1 is, what's that, like 200-ish? Yeah, 200, right on the dot. So again, not concerning here. The lowest so far has been cylinder 4, and it was at 190. So one more to go. We'll see how cylinder 3 looks. Number 3 also came out dry and tested at just over 200. So they all tested good. Number 4 had some decent amount of fuel on the spark plug, and the rest were all like to be expected. So the mystery continues. Well, I think it's located, part of my problem. Pretty sure that's not supposed to be doing that.